My older brother David and I grew up in a small town. After graduating from college, he moved back there and started a family. At first, they lived with our parents, and then he built his own big two-storied house on a large piece of land with a garden, garage, and other outbuildings. The house had a beautiful front porch where they spent warm summer evenings and a spacious backyard where he often hosted family gatherings. He did well and eventually became a director of his own company. He and his wife Emma had an only son, Daniel, who caused them a lot of trouble with his rebellious nature, although he was still very much loved by everyone. As for me, after college I stayed in the regional center, trying to settle my life. For several years I lived in an apartment inherited from my aunt, along with an old car, as a bachelor, while I lived in a factory dormitory. It was a modest existence, but I enjoyed the independence. Later, I married a woman who also had a troubled family background and moved in with her in her one-bedroom apartment. My wife's name is Charlotte. She is 5 years younger than me, looks youthful, like a schoolgirl, and has a lively spirit that attracted me from the beginning. We both felt we had finally found a home in each other. That summer, while on vacation, we decided to visit my brother and my parents. It was time to introduce them to my new wife, as we had a quiet wedding with no fanfare, a simple signing at the local registry office. It had been a long time since I had last visited them, and Daniel was in the army and still undecided about his future. The trip was filled with excitement and slight nervousness as Charlotte and I talked about meeting my family. Due to bridge repairs, we had to take a detour on a country road, hoping not to get stuck in traffic. I trusted my sense of direction and drove on unmarked roads, but we ended up stuck in a low spot in the road, so thoroughly that I wouldn't have been able to get us out on my own. I left Charlotte in the car to set out on my own to find help, hoping to find a truck or tractor that could help us. The surrounding area seemed deserted. I walked for what seemed like forever before I noticed a few houses up ahead. To my delight, there was a tractor parked outside the first house. The owner, though clearly drunk and slurring his words, agreed to help for a little money, and soon we were on our way back to my car, his noisy vehicle. The ride was bumpy and slow, and there was smoke coming from the tractor, but I was relieved to have found help. When we arrived, we found Charlotte standing next to the car looking a little shaken. It turned out that while I was gone, 2 guys on a motorcycle had driven up to her. They tried to push the car and asked Charlotte to get out to make it easier, but it didn't work. She said they looked quite harmless, but it was still a nerve-wracking experience for her. The tractor driver managed to pull the car onto solid ground. He instructed us to get back on the main road, and we continued on our way. When we pulled up to my brother's house, I saw the familiar outline of a 2-story building, a flowering garden, and smoke from the chimney. David, Emma, and my parents greeted us warmly when we arrived, though Daniel still wasn't home. I introduced Charlotte and told them of our misadventure, which caused everyone to laugh. David told us, "Go wash up, change into something comfortable, and then join us at the table. Your room is on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is mostly Daniel's." We were all gathered around the table. Daniel finally showed up. I hadn't seen him in ages. He had grown like his father, looking strong and mature, and his face bore the marks of the boy I used to know. As soon as he walked in, I noticed Charlotte's eyes light up. He greeted us all briefly, and it was obvious that he had grown into a confident young man. Instead of a traditional dinner, we decided to have a barbecue. There was a special place in the garden under the shade of an old oak tree. Daniel headed silently to the shed and returned with a bag of charcoal and a couple of logs. "I'll take care of it," he said confidently, remaining calm and poised. "Oh, Daniel makes such delicious kebabs," exclaimed Emma as Daniel set to work, rejecting all offers to help. As she said, the kebabs turned out delicious, served with fresh cucumbers, tomatoes, and homemade bread. We had a few drinks, enjoying the summer evening, the stars twinkling overhead and the sounds of crickets in the background. There was laughter and stories of our childhood in the air, and I could see that Charlotte was genuinely enjoying herself, her face flushed with excitement and wine. After that, I decided to go to bed, but Charlotte said she would walk in the garden some more. I lay down on the bed with the window open, which overlooked the garden. After about 10 minutes, I heard voices under the window coming from the cool night breeze. I couldn't help myself and listened. "Can I sit next to you?" asked Charlotte, her voice slightly lurching from the wine. "Sit down. Let's talk," Daniel replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm feeling tipsy. I haven't had that much to drink in a long time," Charlotte said with a giggle. "But that's all because of your kebabs. You really know how to make them well." "I'm not only good at kebabs," Daniel replied, his voice low and almost teasing. I pretended to be asleep, determined not to make a fuss. After all, no one was taking my wife away from me. The next day it was time to go raspberry picking in the woods, a family tradition I always looked forward to. Charlotte seemed to be in high spirits. She spent a lot of time upstairs, often disappearing to the second floor with Daniel, and seemed to enjoy it. She and Daniel exchanged jokes and seemed to get along very well, sometimes even too well. When we were away, she invited Daniel to visit us sometime, and soon he was visiting us often. Daniel's visits became regular. He would come on weekends, sometimes bringing fresh produce from their vegetable garden, and sometimes just stopping by to say hello. Charlotte seemed to lighten up when he was around, her laughter echoing through our small apartment. I didn't mind at first. He was family, after all. But as time went on, I began to notice how much attention she paid to him. They would sit in the living room for hours and talk while I did other things. There was an undeniable connection between them, something unspoken that seemed to bring them closer together. One evening after Daniel had left, Charlotte seemed unusually quiet. I asked her if everything was okay, and she just smiled and said she was tired. I knew it was best not to press her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Despite my anxiety, I kept telling myself that it was just my imagination, that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew that things weren't the same anymore. The line between family and something more was starting to blur, and I didn't know how to feel about it.